Well, I think particularly with respect to judges that have lifetime appointments, I think it's important that the standard be a little bit higher. I mean, these guys could be on the bench for a long time and influence a lot of case law, and I think it's worthwhile for there to be a pretty high standard for them to assume the bench.
Gordon, does today's move silence the minority party in the Senate, or does it ensure that ideology is left out of a debate?
No, I think it could actually inflame ideological concerns. And there's a very good reason why the nuclear option hasn't been deployed until today, and that's because the threat that, turnabout is fair play. At some point, there will be Republicans in the White House, and Republicans will be in the Senate again. And I think it's just incredibly short-sighted of Harry Reid and Democratic allies not to acknowledge the fact that they've opened the floodgates to retaliation. I think I liken it to the fact that it's akin to, in a football game, if a team's winning, then they have the right to overturn what the referees say on the field. Well, that may be all well and good if you're Denver right now, but one day they won't be so hot. So,
well, the White House and the Democrats take a different tack, as you know, and I guess it basically boils down to this. Well, exactly, but now. But what's been coming up at least recently is there were 3 vacancies on that D.C. Court of Appeals. It is one of, I guess it is probably the most important appeals court in the nation. A lot of government regulation goes through that particular appeals court. The 3 nominees in question, nobody had suggested that they were not competent. Nobody had suggested that they were not qualified. The opposition, just for whatever reason, did not want them on the bench. Is that enough to hold up nominations, or is that enough to gum up the works, as some people have said has been happening?
Well, I think it's a couple of things are important to remember. First is that the magnitude of a lot of the decisions that come out and the cases that come before this particular court certainly are important. But in terms of the workload that would necessitate, adding more judges to that particular bench is actually not that high. In fact, they've canceled oral arguments because the workload before them isn't so high.
So the idea then is to leave 3 vacancies on a federal appeals court?
Well, no, I think that the idea is, to the extent that there are other places in district courts, and the president even talked about the criminal justice system. This is not the criminal justice system. Why not focus on that if that's the real problem, instead of setting up 3 of these particular judges and arguably packing the court? In fact, as Democrats accused the Bush administration of doing in 2005 when they evidently opposed this sort of tactic. I just think it's incredibly cynical.
Well, you just mentioned the president. He spoke following the Senate action today, and he said, quote, "A majority of senators believe, as I believe, that enough is enough. The gears of government have to work," end quote. Shouldn't the president of the United States, regardless of his or her party, be allowed to put in place the team of their choosing?
I do think that it's, presidents do have the right to nominate their picks, and then the Senate gets to advise and consent. And I think the president, when he was a senator, much like a lot of things, in fact, like the debt limit, held different views on this matter. So I just think it's a very cynical move. They were just looking to pick a fight because and distract from Obamacare, because it's been such a car accident.
Well, I guess the view is a lot different from the Oval Office, I guess, than it is in the Senate chamber. We have about a minute left. There's already talk that today's procedural move, and you alluded to it, will make bipartisan cooperation impossible. But that assumes there's already bipartisan cooperation. So did a toxic atmosphere just become more poisonous, in your opinion?
I believe so. I really do. In fact, with respect to judges, for example, if in the past you needed 60 votes to get someone on the bench, that would encourage someone to put nominees up that were a little bit more moderate. Now, you could see nominees that were, much more ideological because they didn't have to meet that 60-vote test. And I think that could actually inflame partisan tensions, and also just what it does to goodwill among members, particularly with such a hypocritical move. I think it makes everything a lot worse.